When James Turner's wife, Elise, vanishes without a trace after 15 years of marriage, she leaves behind no note, no farewell, only a single cardboard box filled with old receipts. As friends and family scramble for explanations, James is left to grieve and pick apart the fragments of their life together, bewildered and betrayed. But as he starts organizing the chaos of those yellowing slips of paper, one receipt, a dry cleaning bill with an unusual handwritten note and the signature of Elise's former divorce attorney, catches his eye, driven by a mixture of heartbreak and obsession. James begins an investigation into the meaning behind the receipt. Each scrap of paper reveals a layer of Elise's secret life, challenging everything he thought he knew about their relationship. Was she hiding money? Planning her escape for years? Or was she trying to protect him from something darker? As the story unfolds, James is pulled into a web of quiet betrayals, legal manipulation, and a revelation that will force him to confront a devastating truth: that sometimes the people we love the most leave behind trails not to be followed, but to be understood. What begins as a quiet domestic drama turns into a psychological thriller where love, trust, and memory are dismantled piece by piece, and the smallest clue can shatter a lifetime. The house was too quiet. Not the kind of quiet you crave after a long day, but the kind that hums with absence. The air stood still, and every corner of the living room seemed to press inward, as if the walls themselves were trying to say something. James sat on the floor, legs crossed, a cardboard box in front of him like a bomb he wasn't sure how to disarm. She was gone. Elise. 15 years of marriage, a shared mortgage, a golden retriever named Bixby, and no warning. Just the dog whining by the door that morning and that box sitting on the kitchen table with a single note taped to the lid, for James. No explanation. No dramatic scene. No slammed doors or midnight fights. Just receipts. Hundreds of them. Stuffed in envelopes, folded into tiny squares, some so faded they were nearly blank. Gas stations. Pharmacies. Takeout. Even a receipt from the ice cream shop they used to visit in their first year together. Before the arguments began to take the place of conversations, James had spent the first day in denial, thinking maybe she'd be back. Maybe it was just a breakdown. Maybe she needed space. But now, 3 days later, after filing a missing person report and going through her closet to find nearly all of her clothes gone, the box had become something else. A message. A trail. Or maybe a punishment. He started sifting through the receipts, trying to make sense of them. They were dated back more than 10 years, meticulously collected, some even organized by year. Why would anyone keep this? Elise wasn't a hoarder. She hated clutter. She'd once thrown out James's college trophies, claiming dust isn't nostalgic. There was one envelope labeled 2019, spring. James opened it and unfolded a few receipts: a boutique in Midtown, a florist in Brooklyn, and a dry cleaning bill from a place he didn't recognize. The name on the receipt wasn't hers, it was addressed to a Margaret Wallace. But the signature at the bottom. James froze. He knew that name, Franklin Dillard. A divorce attorney. The same one Elise had consulted briefly 5 years ago. During a rough patch they'd worked hard to forget. They'd promised each other they'd move on, start fresh. Couples therapy. Weekend retreats. Forgiveness. Or so he thought. Why would his wife be picking up dry cleaning for someone using a pseudonym? And why would her former divorce lawyer be signing the bottom of the receipt? James took a photo of the slip and enlarged the signature on his phone. It wasn't just signed, it had a note scribbled beneath it: paid in full. Return to client directly, no digital records. His heart thudded. He looked back at the box. Suddenly, it didn't seem like a collection of trash. It looked like a ledger. A record of transactions she hadn't wanted anyone else to see, and he knew he wouldn't sleep that night, because one thing was now clear: Elise hadn't left the receipts as a goodbye. She had left them as a map. A map to what? That question echoed in his mind as he picked up the next envelope, and that's when he found the second name, Helen Prescott. The name of the woman who had died 2 years earlier in what everyone thought was a tragic accident, but not just any woman. Elise's former co-worker. Her best friend, and on the receipt bearing her name, was Elise's signature. James stared at the receipt in his hand, the paper trembling slightly between his fingers. It was a catering invoice from 2 years ago, dated 3 weeks before Helen Prescott's fatal fall from her apartment balcony. The name at the top was hers, Helen's full legal name. But the signature scrawled in black ink at the bottom didn't match. It was Elise's, not forged. Not printed. Signed, by hand. James had seen his wife's signature 1,000 times, on birthday cards, on mortgage papers, on their shared tax returns. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. And it changed the nature of everything. The police had ruled Helen's death an accident. She had been drinking, they said. There was a vague mention of anti-anxiety medication found in her system, and some whispered rumors at Elise's old job about a breakup Helen had gone through. But nothing more. Elise had been devastated. She had spoken at Helen's memorial. She had held James's hand with white knuckles, crying through the entire service. And now James spread the receipts across the floor, eyes scanning them with new urgency. Patterns began to form. Certain businesses reappeared. Certain names. There were receipts from storage facilities under aliases, cash withdrawals that didn't line up with their joint accounts, hotel stays under names James didn't recognize, always in Elise's handwriting. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence stacked higher with every envelope. Elise had secrets. Not small ones, not infidelities or hidden shopping sprees. These were calculated moves, coordinated with her lawyer, and involving people who were either dead or deliberately forgotten. The box wasn't just a trail. It was a confession. Layered and coded, but intentional. He picked up his phone and searched for Franklin Dillard. The attorney's website was sparse and dated, but a direct number was listed. James hesitated. What was he even going to say? Instead, he searched for Helen Prescott's obituary. There it was, simple, respectful, almost sterile. No foul play. Suspected. Survived by her parents and an older sister. James remembered Elise mentioning that sister only once, something about a falling out years ago. He kept scrolling. A comment stood out, buried under condolence messages. I still don't understand what happened that night. She seemed scared the last time we spoke. Something wasn't right. No name attached. Anonymous. James sat back, staring at the comment. Like it might open up and give him answers. Why would Elise sign for Helen's catering order? Why would she be involved in anything connected to Helen's final days? Unless, James's pulse quickened. He stood and went to the hallway closet. At the back, behind the vacuum and a pile of old coats, was a fireproof safe. Their safe. He had almost forgotten about it. Elise used it for documents, passports, valuables. He entered the code, her birthday. It clicked open. Inside were a few folders, a small jewelry box, and a USB drive in a labeled envelope. He plugged it into his laptop. There was only one file, a video. He hit play. The screen flickered. Elise appeared, sitting in their kitchen, her expression tight and pale. She looked straight into the camera. If you're watching this, I'm already gone, she said. And if you've found the box, I need you to listen. James couldn't move. I didn't leave you because I stopped loving you. I left because staying meant endangering us both. And everything that happened, everything I've done, was to protect you. Even if you hate me for it. She paused, her throat tightening. Start with Helen. Start with what happened to her. But know this, what she found wasn't just a mistake. It was a threat. And now it's your threat too. James froze as the screen went black, and the very next moment, his phone buzzed, unknown number, and no message. just a photo. It was a picture of his house, taken from outside. Tonight, James didn't sleep that night. He sat in the living room with the lights off, a kitchen knife gripped loosely in one hand and his phone in the other, staring at the image that had been sent to him. It was unmistakably his house, his porch light on, the curtains drawn, a silhouette visible in the window. His silhouette. The photo had been taken from across the street, maybe even closer. Whoever had sent it hadn't bothered with words. At 3:42 a.m., a knock rattled the front door, not a ring of the bell. Not a quiet tap. A slow, deliberate knock. James froze. Bixby growled low, tail stiff, eyes locked on the door. James stepped forward cautiously and peeked through the peephole. No one. The porch was empty. But something was off. He opened the door just enough to look out and saw it, another envelope. Plain white, resting on the welcome mat. He picked it up with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a single receipt. This time, it was from a law office. Not Dillard's. This one was from a firm in Connecticut, Merrick and Lowell. The client listed was Helen Prescott, but the itemized billing was addressed to an entirely different name, Elise Turner. The service charged preparation of sealed witness testimony. Emergency deposition. No public record. Date: 3 days before Helen's death. James staggered backward and shut the door. Elise had known. She had known something was coming, and whatever it was, Helen had gone to lawyers outside the city to hide it. Why had Elise been listed as the client? Had she paid for it? Forced it? Protected it? He needed answers. And he wasn't going to find them in his living room. By 9 a.m., James was parked in front of the Merrick and Lowell building in Stamford. He hadn't called ahead. He didn't want to give anyone a chance to prepare a lie. He walked in with the envelope in hand, asked to speak with someone about the document, and was promptly denied any information. Client confidentiality, the receptionist said with a polite but final smile. She's dead, James said. The client is dead. Sir, unless you are her executor or legal representative, I'm her best friend's husband. The best friend who vanished 3 days ago after leaving behind this. He set the receipt down on the desk. The receptionist blinked, glanced at the paper, then excused herself. 15 minutes later, James was sitting in a dim conference room, across from a man in a pinstripe suit who introduced himself only as Mr. Lowell. The deposition you're referring to is sealed, Lowell said. We were instructed never to release it unless a specific chain of conditions was triggered. So I must ask, how did you come by this? James didn't answer. Instead, he asked, what conditions? Lowell paused, then opened a drawer. He pulled out a thin file, checked a note inside, and looked up with a grim expression. There's a secondary clause, he said. If both women, Elise Turner and Helen Prescott, are either deceased or officially missing, and if someone in possession of this receipt personally delivers it, we are instructed to release the record. James's throat went dry. Lowell stood, walked to a small safe built into the wall, entered a code, and returned with a sealed manila folder. Inside, a USB drive and a notarized letter. Lowell slid them across the table. Watch it alone, he said quietly. And be prepared. What Helen recorded, it wasn't just for your wife. It was for you. Back in his car, James hesitated for almost 10 minutes before inserting the USB into his laptop. The video opened with Helen sitting in what looked like a hotel room. Her eyes were bloodshot, her face pale, as if she hadn't slept in days. If you're watching this, it means Elise is gone, she began. And it means they know. She took a deep breath. I found something. Something I wasn't supposed to see. Elise tried to stop me, not because she was in on it, but because she was being watched too. This isn't about infidelity. It's not about money. It's about a cover-up. A legal one. And we're both witnesses, whether we like it or not. She held up a folder. This contains contracts, transactions, names. If anything happens to me, if I accidentally die. This needs to go public. She looked straight into the camera, tears in her eyes. I didn't want to drag Elise down with me. But it's too late for that now. Then, her voice dropped to a whisper, there's a man who watches the houses. He waits until you're alone. Don't answer the door at night. The screen went black. James didn't even have time to process the chill spreading through his chest before his phone buzzed again. A new message, and no words, just a video. This time, it showed Elise, walking alone, in a parking garage, followed by a man in a dark coat, timestamped, 2 days ago. The video haunted him. Elise, alone, walking across a dimly lit parking garage. The camera angle was low, grainy, likely from a hidden surveillance device. But what chilled James wasn't just the footage, it was the man who appeared behind her. Distant at first. Then closer. Then suddenly gone. Elise never turned around. She never seemed to know she was being followed. The timestamp placed it 2 days after she disappeared. Which meant she hadn't vanished. She had been running. James couldn't breathe. For a moment, his chest refused to rise. The woman he had spent 15 years with, the one who made Sunday pancakes from scratch and left post-it notes on the bathroom mirror, was being hunted. And he hadn't known. He hadn't even noticed the signs, not until she left the box. The next step came without thought. He drove straight to the old storage facility listed on several of the receipts. It was in a quiet industrial zone, flanked by closed warehouses and rusted signage. The front desk clerk, a tired man in his 60s, barely looked up as James presented the receipt. Elise Turner. Unit 4B. She still paying? The man checked the system and nodded. Paid 6 months in advance. Last visit was about 10 days ago. Can I get in? The clerk hesitated. Technically, it's under her name. James leaned forward, his voice low. She's missing. I think she might be in danger. That was enough. Unit 4B was in the far back corner. James unlocked the roll-up door with a key he found taped beneath the receipt Elise had left him. The door creaked upward, revealing a narrow room stacked with bankers' boxes, each meticulously labeled. On the wall, a corkboard pinned to it were photos. Dozens of them. Elise. Helen. A man in a tailored suit, Franklin Dillard. Another man James didn't recognize. Maps, printouts, receipts, even news clippings. One in particular stopped James cold. Real estate development exec found dead in suspected suicide, no foul play suspected. The face in the photo was the same man from the parking garage video. James stepped closer, scanning Elise's handwritten notes in the margins. Helen met with him 3 times. Paid in cash. Dillard representing him in prior malpractice suit. Same lawyer. Same paper trail. All victims with sealed settlements. Victims, settlements, what was Elise uncovering? James's hands trembled as he opened the first banker's box. Inside were legal documents. Copies of NDAs. Payments. Agreements signed by women he didn't know, and always tied to the same names. Elise hadn't been hiding these. She had been documenting them. Preserving the truth no one else would, and then he saw it, a folder with his name. Inside was a letter. Written by hand. Dated 1 week before she disappeared. James, if you're reading this, I couldn't tell you in person. It was never about hiding from you. It was about protecting you. Years ago, I made a mistake. I found something at Helen's place, files she was too scared to turn in. We thought it would blow over. But then someone came after her. She tried to warn me. I didn't listen. I've spent the last 2 years collecting everything. The box was my insurance. The storage unit, my real legacy. I'm sorry for lying. But I was never unfaithful. I wasn't planning to leave you. I was trying to make sure if they came for me, you'd know why. James sat down on the cold concrete floor, the letter resting in his lap. None of this made sense. Elise was being hunted for exposing some kind of coordinated cover-up involving Dillard, corporate payouts, silenced victims. And now she was gone, maybe still alive, maybe not. And someone knew James was getting close. He pulled out his phone, trying to call the detective who had taken Elise's missing person report. It rang once. Then twice. Then a click. A voice answered, but it wasn't the detective. I told her to stop digging. The voice was male, calm, deliberate. She didn't listen. Let's hope you're smarter than she was. The line went dead. James stared at the phone in his hand, heart racing, skin cold. He looked up, scanning the rows of boxes, the web of secrets Elise had uncovered, and then he realized, if they had been watching her, they were watching him now. It wasn't just part of her past, it was part of the cleanup. James didn't go home. Not after the call. Not after realizing someone knew exactly where he was, what he was doing, and how much he'd uncovered. Instead, he drove for hours without direction, until he found himself parked in front of a roadside motel, the kind with flickering neon signs and curtains that never quite close. Inside, he locked the door, dragged a chair in front of it, and opened Elise's folder again. The letter wasn't the only thing she left for him. Tucked beneath it was a second USB drive, this one marked in red ink, public copy. He hesitated. If Elise had gone through the trouble of separating files, it meant this wasn't just for him. It was meant to be seen. Shared. And that made it dangerous. Still, James plugged it in. The folder contained dozens of documents, scans of contracts, letters, private emails, and video testimonies. But there was one file at the top, confession_final.mp4. He clicked play. Elise appeared on screen, sitting in a dark room lit only by a desk lamp. Her eyes were swollen, but her voice was clear. If you're watching this, it means everything else failed. And I've run out of ways to protect myself. She looked down, collecting herself, then continued. 3 years ago, Helen showed me something. Settlements made to multiple women, all tied to the same development firm. Victims of harassment, intimidation, threats. The company paid them to disappear. Franklin Dillard handled every case. Every one of them was silenced. Legally. Efficiently. Professionally. When Helen tried to speak out, she was followed. Watched. And then she was gone. Elise exhaled slowly. I didn't want to believe she jumped. I still don't. James felt his chest tighten. Elise went on. I spent the next year collecting proof. Not just of what happened to Helen, but of the entire machine behind it. They used law firms to clean up their messes, NDAs as weapons. When I confronted Dillard, he didn't threaten me. He offered me a deal. Walk away. No one gets hurt. But I knew then, if I walked away, someone else would end up like Helen. James clenched his fists. I started leaking documents anonymously. Small pieces. Just enough to test the waters. But they caught on. I noticed strange cars. Mail disappearing. My emails being intercepted. So I made this. A full record. Everything they did, every name. Involved every dollar paid to silence victims. I didn't want revenge. I wanted truth. She leaned forward, closer to the camera. I left the box so you'd know who I really was. Not the wife who packed your lunches or folded your shirts. But the woman who chose not to look away. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry for lying. I loved you. That was always true. The screen cut to black. James sat there, his laptop glowing in the dark. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He just stared, as the weight of her words pressed against him like the silence in the room. By morning, he had made his choice. He sent the video to 6 journalists. 3 law enforcement contacts. 2 public advocacy groups, and then, he disappeared. No social media. No traceable credit cards. Just gone. 2 weeks later, the story broke. Headlines exploded. Lawsuits reopened. Dillard's office was raided. Executives named. Testimonies released. The world finally heard Elise's voice, but James never came forward. Some say he left the country. Others believe he's in hiding, afraid of retaliation. But one thing is certain, the receipts told the story, and he made sure the world listened. Now the question is, if you had found that box, would you have opened it, or would you have left it closed and stayed safe? Let us know. We want to hear what you would have done.